The spring of 1826 did not come to Hallowdene so much as fail to arrive. It was cold into May and wet after that, and the wheat on the home farm went into ground that had not dried since February, and stood yellow and thin at a foot and stopped. The lambs came badly. The elms along the carriage drive had the disease that was in them. All that decade and 11 were dead standing, and nobody had taken them down, because taking them down was a thing that wanted deciding, and nothing at Hallowdene had been decided in 4 years. It was a great house, going quietly to the bad, in the way that strong things go to the bad, from the inside, with everybody in it being perfectly civil about it. There were fires in 5 rooms out of 39. The rain came through the roof of the tithe barn in 11 places, and had been coming through for 3 winters, and the barn was where the whole harvest of that estate had been put, every August since the reign of Queen Anne. Thomasin Frayle noticed the barn on her second morning, which was the sort of thing that made people dislike her. She was 25. She was small and brown-haired, in a gown the colour a slate roof goes in rain, turned once and dyed once, and the dye had not held across the shoulders, and her hands were cracked at the knuckles from cold water. Her eyes were grey and level, and gave back exactly what they were given. She had come as companion to the Dowager Lady Wren at £16 a year, up from Marbury in the carrier's cart, with 1 box and a hand sledge, and she had been in the house 11 hours when she went out at 6 in the morning to see where the light was coming from, and found it coming through a roof. That afternoon, in the small drawing-room, with the door not quite shut, Mr. Ambrose Kitely told his nephew what he thought. He was the Duke of Hallowdene's uncle by marriage, 51, pink and pleasant-faced, and he smiled a great deal. It was the same muscle he used for everything. He said that he did not object to the young person, that she seemed a decent creature, that one must be charitable. He said that it was only that the house had reached a point where every mouth wanted counting. And then he said the thing that Thomasin, standing in the passage with a tray she had not been asked to carry, heard entire, that she had nothing whatever to offer this family, and that, in 11 months, she would be gone and forgotten, and no one the worse. He said it kindly. The Duke of Hallowdene said nothing at all. He was 33, and looked older, in a coat as black as a shut door, with a face that had been a good-looking face before somebody went over it with a plane and took all the give out of it. He had had a wife and a daughter, and had lost them both in the same fortnight in the spring of the year 22, and since then he had shut the east wing and stopped going into the account room and signed whatever his uncle put in front of him, because reading it meant seeing his wife's hand in the margins of the older books. Thomasin set down the tray in the still room and went on with her day. She did not cry. She had learned young that tears were a coin she could not spend, and had never once been given change for. She did the flues that week with a holly bough, because the sweep charged 1 and 6, and a bough cost nothing. She sent back a side of beef that had come in green, with a note in her own hand, courteous and immovable, and the next came in red. She read to Lady Wren from 10 until 2, and said very little, and she began, at night, to keep a ruled book. What Hallowdene did not know, and would not know for 4 months, was that Thomasin Frayle could do the one thing that house needed doing, and had no one left to do. Her father had been Nathaniel Frayle, corn factor of Marbury, 30 years at the same desk, and she had kept his books from the age of 14 after her mother died, and had gone with him to the corn market every Thursday of her girlhood, and knew the price of wheat, barley and oats in 11 parishes, the way other young women know the words of songs. He had died in the year 22, owing money he had not owed the year before, ruined by a partner who had bought forward on his name, without his knowing, and the partner had gone to Bristol, and Nathaniel Frayle had gone into the ground at Marbury, and his daughter had gone into service under her mother's name, which was Frayle, her father's having been Frayle Anstey on all the papers. She had £11 in a tin, and a pair of brass corn scales, worn bright at the pans by 30 years of her father's hands, which she had refused to sell. Measure it twice, and write the number down, he had told her, and then No frightened man alive can talk it out of you. And in 11 weeks at Hallowdene, keeping the kitchen book because nobody else would, she had come to a conclusion she did not want. The estate was not poor. The estate was being sold badly. Its wheat went to one factor at Marbury every October, all of it at once, at whatever the October price was. And October was the worst month in the year to sell wheat, and had been every year since anybody could remember. And the factor at Marbury was Mr. Ambrose Kitely's wife's brother. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. It was Lady Wren who broke it open, in the way of old women, which is to say, without asking anybody. She was 81, and had buried a duke and 2 sons, and sat by the one good fire, with a spine like a poker, and eyes that had not gone anywhere at all. In the last week of June she put her hand flat on the page and said, "Stop. You have read me 400 pages and not one word of your own. What is in the book you write in at night? Numbers, my lady. Do not be modest. I loathe it above all the false virtues, and I have no time left. What numbers?" So Thomasin told her that the tithe barn roof was open in 11 places, and the harvest was going into it in 8 weeks, that the estate had sold its wheat in October for 9 years, running at an average of 9 shillings the bushel, when the January price, in those same years, had averaged 11 and 3, and that the difference on the Hallowdene crop was somewhere near £400 a year, and that £400 a year for 9 years was a number she had written down twice, and checked, and did not care to say out loud in that room. The old woman was quiet a long moment. 1 second, 2, 3. "My grandson is not a fool," she said. "He is a grieving man, which is a different thing, though from the outside they wear the same coat. He has let one man hold the whole of it, because he cannot bear to touch it himself. Go on keeping your book, girl, and keep it on my authority, which in this house is a great deal older than my brother-in-law's, and when somebody comes to take it off you, and somebody will, you hold on." He found her in the tithe barn in July. She was up a ladder, with a slate in her hand, counting holes, and she did not come down, and she gave him the number of holes, and the number of square feet, and what a Marbury slater would want for it, which was £31 4, and said that £31 4 against a harvest of 1100 was not a decision that wanted much thinking about, and that he had 8 weeks. He came back on the Thursday, and then on the Monday, and by August, 3 mornings a week, and it was never called anything at all, and what they did was work. He held the ladder. He learned to hand her the tally. She gave him the brass scales one morning, and made him weigh a sample of his own wheat, and read the number off the beam, and he found, standing in his own barn with his sleeves back, that it was the first thing he had done with his hands in 4 years. He told her one evening, with the rain going on the new slates, that he had not been into the East Wing since the April of 22, and Thomasin Frayle did not say she was sorry. "Then go in," she said. "You have paid your uncle 4 years' wages for the privilege of not knowing, and it is the most expensive thing on this estate, and I can show you what it has cost to the shilling." Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, the almost. The barn was slated in the 2nd week of August, £31 4, and the harvest went in dry, and Ambrose Kitely came to the still room in the last week of the month. "Miss Frayle," or Frayle Anstey, as the Marbury registers have it. He picked up the brass scales and set them down. "Nathaniel Frayle's girl, a bankrupt corn factor's daughter, in this house under half a name, meddling in the sale of a crop she has no standing whatever to touch. You will be asked what you are, my dear, and you will say a companion, and then somebody will observe that a woman whose father died owing money has contrived a great deal of private access to a grieving man and to his books." The smile did not move. "The rent audit is on the 9th of October. Be gone before it, and there is nothing said at all." And Thomasin looked at the pink, pleasant face, and saw the fear under it for half a second, and understood he had not come about her father at all. He had come because a woman with corn scales had been standing too near a crop he had been selling to his wife's brother for 9 years. She had 6 weeks, and she used them at night with the door bolted and one tallow candle, because a half-built case can be laughed away and a finished one cannot. She had the Marbury corn returns, printed weekly, 9 years of them, got from the market clerk who had known her father. She had the estate's own sale notes for those 9 Octobers out of the account room, which the Duke fetched himself. She got the marks of 4 tenants to what they had been paid for their own wheat in the same years, which was more than the estate got for its better grain. She got the slater's bill and the barn's condition sworn to by 2 men who had carried straw into it in the wet of 24 and watched it heat and spoil, and she copied the whole of it fair, twice, and checked her columns twice, and said the totals out loud in the empty room, because a number said out loud cannot be argued away by a frightened man. The audit sat in the long room on the 9th of October, 61 men at the tables, and the tenants standing at the back. Kitely laid it out beautifully. He had a duty that gave him no pleasure. There was a young woman in the household serving under a curtailed name, the daughter of a man who had died a bankrupt at Marbury. She had been in the account room, which was no part of her office. She had lately contrived a most remarkable degree of intimacy with his Grace, and he was very sorry, extremely sorry, and supposed nobody could be blamed but the woman herself, since it was in the nature of such people to get in where they could. 61 faces turned. Thomasin Frayle stood up, and found that the dread of a thing is nearly always larger than the thing. "Every word Mr. Kitely has said is true," she said, and her voice went the length of that room without her lifting it. "My name is Thomasin Frayle Anstey. My father was Nathaniel Frayle, corn factor of Marbury, and he died in the year 22, owing money that a partner had borrowed on his name, and I came into service under half my name, because the other half would not have got me a place. I did not say so, and that was cowardice, and I do not defend it. And since I am to be looked at today, you shall have the rest of it. This estate has sold the whole of its wheat in October, in one lot, in each of the last 9 years. Here are the Marbury corn returns for those years, printed and public, and here are the estate's own sale notes beside them. The average got was 9 shillings the bushel. The average January price in those same 9 years was 11 3. On this estate's crop that is £411 a year, and over 9 years it is £3,700, and I have added it twice. 4 of your own tenants got better money for worse grain, and have made their marks to it. And the tithe barn stood open in 11 places for 3 winters, while £40 a year was charged for its maintenance. And I have the slater's bill for £31 4, which is what it actually cost in August. The buyer in every one of those 9 Octobers was Mr. Fenner of Marbury, who is Mr. Kitely's wife's brother. Ambrose Kitely laughed. It was small and pleasant, and it was the worst thing he could have done, and he knew it before it was out of his mouth, because no man laughs at a column of figures. And in the silence after it, the Duke of Hallowdene came the whole length of that room and stood beside her and said, to the table, in the flattest voice in England, "The lady has my sale notes because I gave them to her. In May my uncle said in my hearing that she had nothing to offer this family, and I did not answer him, and I have thought about my not answering him every day since. Send for the market clerk." What followed took until dark, and was not lovely. There was a night in November when the Duke stood with a pen and every intention of writing to 9 men who would have finished Kitely by Lady Day, and Thomasin put her hand flat on the paper. "Send him to the law, and not one letter," she said. "He can answer at the bench, where there are figures and witnesses, and a man may reply. But my father was finished by a thing done quietly on his name, that he never got the chance to answer, and I will not begin that same thing over in the other direction, and call it justice, because it happens to be my turn. And he did it, because he was frightened of being poor. I have been frightened of being poor for 4 years, and I did secret things about it too, and mine happened to be honest, and that is luck as much as virtue. So it went to the assizes, and Kitely made restitution of about 1/3, and the Duke made up the rest to the tenants out of his own pocket, and counted it cheaply bought. The wheat of that year was held in a dry barn and sold in 3 lots, in December, February, and April, at an average of 11 and 8, and the estate cleared £440 more than it had cleared in any year since the war. He waited until every shilling was settled and the tenants paid and her father's affairs at Marbury put straight, so that there should be nothing left between them that could be mistaken for a debt, and then he came to the barn in the following spring with his sleeves already back. "There is nothing owing," he said. "My grandmother has offered you a home for life, whatever you say to me, and has undertaken to outlive me if I make you uncomfortable in it. So I am asking a free woman." He turned the corn scales over in his hands. "You were told in this house that you had nothing to offer it. You had £11 and a pair of brass scales, and you have made this estate £440 in a year and put a roof on a barn that has stood since Queen Anne. I am not asking you for that. I am asking because you told me the number of holes in a roof when everybody else in my life had spent 4 years telling me I was not to be troubled. Will you marry me? On one condition," she said. "Name it. The 11 dead elms come down this winter, and the men who take them down have the timber, and nobody has to ask anybody's permission about it ever again." A year on, in the August, the Duchess of Hallowdene stood in a dry tithe barn at 6 in the morning with a pair of brass scales and weighed a sample of the new wheat off the home farm and read the number off the beam and wrote it down. Outside, the drive ran between 11 young elms that would not live to be big, and the harvest was coming in. She had been told she had nothing to offer, and it had been said kindly by a man who was quite certain of it, in a house where nobody had counted anything in 4 years. Nothing to offer is not a description of a person. It is a description of the trouble somebody has taken to find out. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.